They found Guthred walking out of the woods barefoot. Blood on his hands, not a single scratch on him. Since then he hadn't spoken much, and not since the raid that left 3 dead and left him with scars down his back and a voice like gravel. But when villagers started vanishing, first old Lifa, then the boy Svan, then Thora, the baker, they didn't turn to Guthred for leadership, they turned to him to hunt. Because Guthred had a way of tracking things that didn't want to be found. That's how he ended up crouched at the edge of the pine wood, where the snow sagged under the strange weight and the forest was too quiet. He found prints in the snow. Not quite human, not quite beast. Long toes, deep prints, something that walked then crawled, and beside the prints, a stump, soaked in blood, steam still rising, and then he saw it, lodged in the bark, a scrap of wool dyed crimson, stitched with the symbol of the village elder. Guthred tugged it loose. The cloth gave way. In his hand it was wet, ragged, and bitten. And that evening, when they went to find the elder, he was gone. You've heard of werewolf myths, the myths of Europe, France, Romania, castles, full moons, and silver bullets. Forget about those. The oldest werewolf stories, the darkest, most twisted ones, come from the north. From the snow-choked pine forest, where the wind sounds like it's breathing from the fjords, where the warriors vanish in their own rage. From sagas carved into memory, not parchment. Today, we're dragging one of those sagas back into the firelight. And long before Hollywood turned werewolves into heartthrobs and tragic predators, the Norse whispered of men who didn't turn by accident. They chose it. They donned the skin of wolves, and when they howled, they didn't stop being men, they just stopped wanting to be. This episode, it isn't fantasy. It's not even mythology. It's a warning. A travel warning for sure. Don't wander Scandinavian woods after nightfall, but a deeper one too. Because if the beast lives inside of you, then it doesn't matter how far you run. And when we're done, you'll understand what the Vikings did. The real danger isn't in the forest. It's in the man who stops pretending to be human. And the one terrifying truth buried beneath every werewolf tale, there's no such thing as a silver bullet. They found the elder's door ajar, unlatched from within. His hearth had gone cold. His boots were still by the fire, dry and waiting. A mug of untouched ale sat silently on the table, undisturbed. But there was no sign of Heston. Not in the longhouse, not at the forge, not even at the graveside of his son, where he was often found at dusk. By twilight, half the village was searching, and by nightfall, no one was speaking above a whisper. Guthred returned to the woods, not because he wanted to, but because he had to know. The elder had always been something more than a man. Steel-backed, stone-faced, he was the kind of person whose presence anchored the world around him. But now, the world felt different, on the verge of feeling lost. Like a ship in the ocean floating aimlessly. As he searched the forest, the trees felt closer, the stars more distant, and every sound, snap of a twig, groan of a tree, seemed to breathe behind his neck. Still, Guthred pressed. He pressed deeper into the dark. He passed the old boundary stones, markers set generations ago, warning travelers not to go further unless they sought to join the dead. Beyond them lay the dark wood. It wasn't the name that scared people. It was the stories. Trees that bled, echoes that answered back, shadows that moved when the wind didn't, and worse, curses. The kind you didn't bring back to the village. The kind you brought back inside of you. Snow cracked underfoot as Guthred followed the trail, like a beast zigzagging through the woods. That he couldn't decide which way to go, whether to walk, whether to crawl, or maybe even march. The prince led him to an outcrop overlooking the fjord. That's where he saw it, something kneeling in the snow, naked, hunched, shivering. The air stank, iron and rot. Guthred stepped closer, spear in hand. "Elder?" he called, though he already knew the answer. The shape flinched, twitched, then turned. What looked back at him was not a man. Its jaw was too long, its teeth too sharp, its shoulders twitched as if the flesh no longer fit right. But the worst part, its eyes, not yellow, blue. They flickered with a plea just for a moment, then something changed. The face twisted, the hands clenched into claws, and it shrieked, not like a wolf, but like a man being devoured by one. Guthred didn't run, not yet. He stepped back, slow. The beast rose to 2 feet, still human in shape, but wrong in every way. Taller, joints bent oddly, skin stretched too thin over muscle and bone. It seemed to pulse. It stalked forward, 1 step, then 2, but then it froze. It sniffed, eyes narrowed, and then, impossibly, it spoke, not in words, in Heston's voice, rasping, broken, echoing like it came from deep inside a cave. "I tried to take it off." Then the creature lunged. Guthred dove sideways, rolling through the snow and pine needles. His shoulder slammed into stone. The spear skid into the dark. Behind him, the sound of claws on bark, something massive leaping into the trees, then silence. Not absence of noise silence, haunting silence, the kind where even your own breath betrays you. He held still, frozen, listening. Branches cracked, snow fell. A growl, low and wet, rose behind him, then stopped. He turned slowly. Nothing. Only the wind. Only footprints. Footprints that led away, but not from the beast, from someone else. Booted, human, deliberate, trailing around the scene as if watching, as if following both hunter and prey, and left behind a pendant, hung from a strip of black leather etched with a rune. Guthred didn't recognize it. Twisted, tangled, neither Norse nor Christian. He picked it up, and from behind him a voice spoke, low, female, calm as the snow. "You shouldn't have come here alone." You've seen all kinds of werewolves in movies. The moody, tragic half-hero, half-beast. The human stalker, the human killer. But to the Vikings, it was much worse. Because they didn't just believe werewolves existed. They believed you could become one. Not by curse, but by choice. And once you put on the wolfskin, you might never come back. In the North, they didn't call them werewolves. They called them wolf. They also called them outlaws. There were a couple words that the Norse used for werewolf. One meaning wolf, one meaning outlaw. Either way, the words were carved onto the names of those banished from society, not just as criminals, but those who had become something other than human. To be called by one of these names was to be declared inhuman, as if the gods themselves no longer saw you as a man. And if that word stuck, you were no longer protected by the laws of kin or clan. You could be hunted or even killed on sight. But how did one become one of these wolf people? Some said it began with a quest of vengeance. Others said it was rage. But the most terrifying, some said it began with a ritual, and some that wanted it. The Volsung saga, written centuries ago, tell of 2 men, Sigmund and his son. They discover 2 enchanted wolf pelts hanging in the forest. When they wear them, they take on the behavior of wolves. They fight like animals, lose their speech, and they prowled the woods as beasts for 10 days. During that time, they attacked even those they loved. It wasn't a story about shape-shifting. It was a warning about what happens when you become the thing that you hate. Another example are those elite Norse warriors who donned wolfskins. Not berserkers exactly, but those who fought in the same way. And they wore wolfskins, painted their faces, and worked themselves into a trance before a battle. They foamed at the mouth, immune to pain, lost to fear. Some sagas say they could bite through shields. Others said they howled and growled in their sleep. One thing they all agree on: these elite wolf warriors didn't just fight like wolves, they believed they were. Now ask yourself, how many times can you pretend before it stops being pretending? How many raids does it take before the bloodlust doesn't fade? At what point do you stop wearing the wolf skin and start being it? That's what made the Viking idea of werewolves so terrifying. It wasn't magic, it was identity. You wore the skin to fight better, to survive, to protect your people, but in so doing, you risked forgetting what it felt like to be a person at all. And here's what most people miss. To the Vikings, the line between beast and man wasn't a line at all. It was a door anyone could walk through if they were hungry enough, if they were hurt enough, if they were desperate enough. Some tales speak of men who returned from war changed, not in the soul, but in the eyes. They growled in sleep, ate raw meat, stared too long at the moon. Others never truly returned at all. And every once in a while, children would whisper about the wild man in the woods who walked on all fours when no one watched. Rune stones in Sweden even reference wolf in the sanctuary. A warning, a confession, maybe both. Because if a man who had once stood among you could become a monster, who else might do the same? Now, if you're thinking this all sounds like some warrior myth of adrenaline and aggression wrapped in wolfskin, remember this. These weren't stories told around the hearth to entertain. They were stories whispered in fear, spoken not to celebrate, but to warn. If you read between the lines of the sagas, you'll see it. The werewolf wasn't the enemy in the forest. He was the hero who turned into a monster. Because once he put on the wolf persona, he couldn't take it off. And the one thing no one dares ask aloud: how many villager warriors came back from the battle a little too quiet about their experience? How many heroes lived just a little too far from the rest of the village? How many hunters stayed gone longer than they should have and came back with no game, but still blood on their hands? In our modern world, we might call it trauma. We might call it rage. We might call it losing self-control. The Vikings had a different word: the wolfman. And when someone became one, there was only ever one ending: a hunt. Most people think werewolves are the victims, cursed by a bite, marked by fate, forced into violence, begging to be cured. But in the Norse world, that's not how it began. You didn't become a wolf because of a curse. You became one because you wanted to, or, in some cases, because you had no choice. During the Viking Age, the North was a world where strength meant survival. No police, no prisons, no forgiveness for the weak. In Viking society, honor and fear were two sides of the same axe. If you could terrify your enemy before your sword left its sheath, you won. So, some warriors didn't just train harder, they sought to become something more than a man. And that's when whispers of ritual began to spread. Not everyone could be a berserker, frenzied and unstoppable, but anyone could take a darker path and become a wolf. Folklore in Iceland and northern Norway speak of isolated warbands, small cults of men who would don real wolf pelts, smear their faces with ashen blood, and spend nights in the deep forest howling until they forgot their own names. These weren't games, these weren't rites. Some drank hallucinogenic brews made of mushrooms or herbs, possibly toxic plants, used to create a trance state. Some carved runes into their own skin, specifically the runes associated with the god Tyr, sacrifice and control of chaos. Others participated in chants and seances until the world twisted around them, until they felt the wolf inside of them, and once it came, they welcomed it. These warriors, they weren't cursed. They were elevated, or so they believed. An old saga tells of a man whose name literally means icicle, cold and unyielding. He trained in silence, disappeared into the mountains for weeks at a time, and returned with blood on his arms and teeth marks on his own wrists. Locals whispered he had learned to bind the wolf to his will, not fight it, not resist it, but ride it. He became feared not because he transformed, but because he could fight like someone who was both man and beast. Other sagas tell of a more subtle example. A man dreams repeatedly of wolves standing over his bed. He awakens howling. He begins walking into the woods at night, and by the end of the saga, the townsfolk tell of the shadows that speak in his voice and the growls in the dark. Was it a metaphor, madness, or was it a cultural echo, a warning of what ambition without restraint can become? Some didn't seek the wolf for war. They sought it because they had nothing else left. Those who had been exiled, branded outlaws, stripped of family, kin, and law, they were already living like animals, cast out into the wilderness. You can listen to the episode on Viking outlaws to hear more. So these outlaws became animals in order to survive. In the northernmost parts of Scandinavia, folk tales speak of wolfmen who stalked the tundra, men who gave up language, who chewed bones, who killed lone travelers with precision. For hunger? For madness? For meaning? Maybe. All because the world had thrown them out and the wolf personified survival. Even kings took notice. Some runestones speak of elite warriors nicknamed Grey Cloaks or Moonbiters. In raids, they were loosed before dawn, not to win battles, to spread fear, to spread terror. Imagine waking to a burning village and a figure in a wolfskin soaked in blood, grinning and growling in the firelight. To Christian monks, they were demons. To local clans, they were demons. To kings and villagers alike, they were demons. To themselves, they were who they desired to be, and possibly what the world made them to be. But there was always a price. Every tale ends the same way. Isolation, madness, regret. One story tells of a warrior who wore the same wolfskin for 3 winters straight. When he finally removed it, his own dogs didn't recognize him and they tore him to pieces. In another, a man who fought with the rage of a wolf returned home but refused to speak. When he finally spoke, all he said was, "The wolf came home." Then he vanished into the woods and was never seen again. Hollywood turned werewolves into fantasy. Modern fitness gurus tell men, "Be a beast." Influencers talk about embracing rage, the alpha mindset, no mercy. But the Vikings knew something we forget. Once you let the beast in, it doesn't leave. And the most terrifying wolf is the one you enjoy becoming. So yes, the Vikings believed in werewolves, but they didn't fear the ones in the woods. They feared the ones who might take up residence in their hearts and minds, who would lead them in destructive ways, hurt themselves or their families until one day they didn't come home, or worse, they did. Guthred turned slowly. The woman stood between the 2 ancient pines, barefoot, her cloak swaying like a mist, her face pale as snowdrift. "Who are you?" he rasped. Her eyes, gray as storm clouds, never blinked. "The one who warned him." She nodded towards the circle of stone, each marked with the symbol of tear. "He asked for it," she continued. "And now?" Guthred asked. She stepped forward. "I will tell you the truth." Guthred gripped his spear tight. "There's no taking it off." With those words, she took a step back and then vanished without a sound. Only the wind was left to answer his questions now. What is happening? Who is the elder and who is she talking about? He picked up the trail again. A trail of blood, clawed trees, footprints, but they were deliberate, not random anymore. They were no longer scattered mindlessly. He had seen this before. He could tell that the predator was trying to lead his prey into a trap. Guthred continued vigilant, passing landmarks he knew from childhood. A felled pine where he once set traps for rabbits, a hollow log where he'd carved his favorite rune. A trail was circling back to the village. He thought instantly the target must be going back to the village, so he ran. He ran faster than he thought his body could. The cold was nothing now, only the sound of his everything faded, nothing mattered. Just get back to the village was the only thought that was going through his head at that time. By the time he reached the edge of the village, he could hear it, screams, and not the kind that echo, the kind that die mid-breath. He barreled into the square, saw a shape blur past the blacksmith's hut. Wood splinters everywhere, blood on posts. He followed the path of destruction to the square. Then he saw the creature, human-like, but not in every way. It leapt, its back arched, claws out. It struck a man through the chest like a hawk snatching a hare in the field, and then turned slowly and saw Guthred. The beast paused, something behind the eyes. Guthred knew that look, and he thought, it's not possible. This whole time they were worried about and looking for Heston. It was Heston's face that flickered like a candle behind the eyes of the beast. But the beast twisted again. The jaw split, the spine cracked, the wolf was back. Guthred didn't shout. He simply stepped forward. I know you're in there, he said. And for the briefest moment, the growling stopped. They circled each other like wolves, deciding who would be the next alpha. Both staring with intensity, both ready to fight. Guthred struck first, fast, wide, high. The beast ducked, clawed back. Guthred's shoulder split open. But he stood. This wasn't an ordinary duel. This was a predator versus predator, and only one would survive. The beast closed the gap, looking to exploit the wound, but Guthred's spear sliced deep into the beast's side. Blood arced. The beast howled, and the whole town heard it. Eyes peered from doorways. The brave and the curious took a position to catch a glimpse of the battle. Men gripping knives and tools, not knowing how the battle would play out. The beast roared again, but this time the sound wasn't rage. It was pain. Pain and memory. The beast looked down to evaluate the gash, but as soon as it lowered its eyes, Guthred thrust his spear just under the right rib. The creature staggered, looked at the spear buried deep. It fell to one knee, then two. Their eyes met, and the deep brown eyes of the beast turned blue again, and showed something no longer beast, but more human. And then something changed. The fur peeled back, the jaw shrank, the claws cracked and curled inward. The village stood shocked, and Guthred was saddened because of what they were all witnessing, the death of their beloved elder, Heston. Heston knelt there, broken but human. His life was quickly escaping. Guthred approached solemnly. The elder raised his eyes. With a look that was a mix of sorrow and gratitude, Heston spoke his final words. You set me free. Guthred said nothing. Heston grinned just a bit. Then his head fell forward, and his body followed. He didn't rise again. They burned him at dawn, and not with scorn, because they knew. They knew that the beast could take up residence in any of them if it chose. That evening, the village exhaled. The town was safe from the wolf. And Heston was free from the pain, the control, and the chains of the wolf. The village never spoke of the incident. The wolfskin that remained, it was burned, and the ashes were spread by the wind. The woman in the woods was never seen again. Who she was and what her role was is not clear. But every full moon after that, Guthred wondered if another soul would beg her for a ritual that couldn't be undone and only had one fate. Guthred found a home in the village that he helped protect. He never left. The people revered his act of courage and awarded him the position of elder. Every night, he walked the perimeter, not because he feared the forest, but because the village's security was his responsibility. The village burned the wolfskin, but the wolfskins were plentiful if you knew where to look. And with a desire to be something else, the danger always exists to lose your true identity in something that's only purpose is to consume the one who wears it and possibly others that come into contact with its rage. The Norse understood something we've forgotten. The beast never dies. It waits, and it's always ready. In the sagas, monsters rarely appear without cause. They are made from pain, from loss, from men who reached for power and didn't let go. The werewolf wasn't just a creature in the woods. He was a man who no longer wanted to be one. The wolfskin gave strength, a new identity, and the feeling of overwhelming power and freedom from human limitations. But the cost? Your name, your memory, your soul, and maybe even the ones you love. Because once you become the beast to win the fight, it doesn't always come off. That's what made the werewolf so feared in any context. And so we've met the Norse wolfmen. They may not snarl in the forests of the north anymore, but they still shout from the postmodern views that there is no truth but the truth you make. Be a beast, be feared, never be weak. They sell rage as freedom, violence as virtue, self as savior, and millions follow this philosophy into the dark. But the sagas left a warning. What you wear to win the war, to feel unlimited freedom, may just cost you both in the end. Don't think that philosophy is the only gateway to this destructive identity. Trauma, addiction, anger issues, they all contribute. But the Norse aren't offering a cure, they're only offering a mirror and a warning. Hollywood gave us silver bullets, clean kills, easy outs. The sagas offer no such thing. There's no weapon that works on the inside except truth and the courage to embrace that truth regardless of where it leads. Guthred defeated the beast because he was willing to stand and protect the town. Guthred didn't win because he was stronger. He won because he chose a path that wasn't safe. He chose to risk his life over self-preservation. He stood between his people and the monster they were unable to fight themselves. Don't glamorize the beast. Don't wear the skin the world tries to hand you. And whatever you do, don't lie to yourself and say you can take it off whenever you want. The real war isn't out there. It's within. And it won't be won by rage, denial, or strength. It will be won by the one who has the courage to face it without becoming it. So when it rises in you, that need to lash out, to dominate, to be something else, to feed the wolf, you have to ask, is it worth it to gain that thing you desire and lose yourself in the end? Until next time, be bold, be strong, and awaken the Viking in you.